There you go. Hi, everybody. Back to the Moms at Work speaker series. We have someone who most of you are already familiar with, Deborah Hudson. And Deborah, I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself to anybody who doesn't know who you are.
Hi, Moms at Work group. You guys are awesome. My name's Deborah. I am an employment lawyer. I practice all areas of workplace law in Ontario. I run my own practice, and I've had the privilege and opportunity to help lots of the moms in this group, unfortunately, because issues do come up. Not unfortunately, because I love working with you, but unfortunately, because so many issues come up. But yeah, so today I would like to sort of speak about some general questions that come up in relation to pregnancy and maternity leaves.
Right. And we get a lot. I asked Deborah here because we get so many of the same questions coming up over and over again that we thought this would be a really great resource that you can share with, other people who have similar questions, and you can just point them right here because we're going to do some of that today. So why don't you let us know what we're going to talk about today?
Sure. So I have like sort of the basic top questions that come up. And so I just thought I would go through, I'll sort of read what the question is and I'll go through that. Just note, I practice law in Ontario, Canada. So my questions are generally, my practice is generally related to professions that are provincially regulated in Ontario. Canada has very similar laws across the board. But just so you know, if you're unionized, you might also have some special treatment because of your collective agreement. So I'm just sort of flagging that generally. That's sort of where I'm going. So the first question that I thought I would ask is, can my employer terminate my employment because I'm pregnant? Unfortunately, I've had, some women come to me, they tell their employer that they're pregnant, and then all of a sudden they're terminated. So the answer is, an employer cannot terminate you because you're pregnant. However, there are circumstances where it would be legal to terminate you even if you're pregnant. So I guess the best example I can give is if you work, say, for a company and you work in a department of 5 people, and if your employer has made a business decision to shut down that department, just because you're pregnant, it's not going to mean they can't terminate you because they're shutting down the whole department. So the question that I would be asking you is, were you terminated because you're pregnant? And if there's any link whatsoever, even if it's one of 5 reasons, then it's discriminatory and contrary to the Human Rights Code. Now, that doesn't mean the employer might not do it. Unfortunately, employers do illegal things all the time. But if they terminate you because you're pregnant or for any reason linked to your pregnancy, then it would be illegal and you could be entitled to more damages.
So maybe you could explain, so a lot of people are unfamiliar with damages, right? So what would it mean to be entitled to, is that more money?
Good question. Good question. And sorry for taking it for granted. But yeah, so damages in employment law cases, there's a few types of damages. So yes, it's money. It's usually monetary remedies. So it could be loss of earnings, so notice, but it also could be extra damages. So loss of earnings would be like, I make $60,000 a year. I'm paid on a monthly basis. So maybe I get, depending on your length of service, I can't tell you how much you get, but if you're going to get a salary continuance, loss of earnings, that's what we would be arguing for. But then there's another type of damages called human rights damages, and those damages are non-taxable damages, would be in addition to the lost earnings notice portion. You can also argue for things like legal fees, benefit continuation. And in the Human Rights Tribunal, which is an unfortunately really slow process right now, but you can argue reinstatement. You can argue, it's not commonly requested or awarded, but it's there. You can also request the employer train management, and there's some other sorts of remedies that we can request.
Great. Yeah. See, I think a lot of people don't know their options, right? I think that there's lots of options here to go after those things. So it's a great opportunity to actually speak with someone to understand what you might be entitled to.
Yeah, and the options, I think this is probably a good basic understanding that usually the first thing that we do if someone comes to me and there's a potential, they've been terminated and we're arguing with the employer for more damages, the first thing I do is write a demand letter. It's a lawyer letter and it has all the facts. And I would say the majority of my cases actually settle at the letter writing stage. Now, it's not everything. My best guess is maybe only 15 to 20% of my cases I would start a lawsuit document or a human rights application, maybe even less, because a lot of things do settle pre-litigation. So that's something you would talk with your lawyer about. But it's good to know that it starts with a letter and many things are settled, because it's an uncomfortable process to be in.
Right.
Like nobody wants to be in it.
Good.
Except me, to fight for your rights.
Except you, because that's your job. All right, so that's a great answer and a good description of damages so that people understand what that is. Great. Okay.
Yeah. And so like I always like my client intake form has like, what's your salary? Do you get bonus? Do you get benefits? Like a good counsel should be asking you all those questions, because when
Right.
we're asking for damages, we're trying to ask for all those things that you got. So something to prepare and think about is, what is my compensation? And if you don't have all that information, you can guess. Like, don't over stress, the information, but that's sort of something to put your mind to.
Good.
Yeah. So then the second question that I had was, what happens if I'm sick or unable to work during my pregnancy?
Right.
Yeah, so this comes up. So if you have medical reasons why you can't work due to your pregnancy, or for other medical reasons unlinked to your pregnancy, I mean, you have rights to either get a workplace accommodation or to take time off. So I would, always recommend going to your doctor, getting a medical note, and understanding what your needs are. Is it an accommodation, working from home, or standing desk, or, time off for medical appointments, or is it actually time off? Those are going to depend on your circumstance, but employers are required to accommodate any medical issue, whether it's linked to your pregnancy or not, to the point of undue hardship, which is like really hard. So they have to give you those things. Something to mention that, employers are not required to provide you paid time off. However, many employers do have some paid personal days. Some employers have short-term disability leave, and failing that, there's also EI sick leave benefits. Also, you can start your maternity leave up to 12 weeks prior to your due date. So sometimes people experience issues and they might have to start they might be recommended to maybe go off work 6 weeks or, before their due date. And in those cases, you can also start your EI early. However, what I would say is, if you work for an employer that has short-term disability and you qualify, you're going to be much better off to go on the short-term disability for those 6 weeks and then start your EI after, because your EI entitlement's limited to how much you can get. So if you do have that sick leave benefit, look into it and use the sick leave before taking your EI maternity leave benefit.
And I think we tend to look at this like a ladder, right? When you're looking at leaves, it's like, look at what your employer offers you. Look if there's paid leave options. Look if there's sick time, because sort of like EI is going to be there, but you may have lots of other options depending on where you work, right?
Yeah, and EI, depending on what your income is, EI might actually be a lot less than your sick leave income and stuff like that. So I love, Allison, I love that explanation. Look at the ladder. If you have all these other benefits, let's use those puppies up before we go into the EI, because then, yeah, so definitely like know what is available to you. And in a lot of cases, like an HR person might be able to sit down and tell you that, like if your organization has good supports around that. I worked in HR for a year at a municipality that was fantastic. And they would sit down with people and say, here's your rights, use the sick leave. They were really good about it. That was a wonderful organization. Some organizations are not as wonderful, but anyway, see what's available to you and use those resources.
And I think we should caveat for people, because people get really scared when you hear like short-term disability. It's sort of just an extension of sick leave, right? So people are very scared to use it. It might be hard to qualify, or whatever. And like your HR department should be able to walk you through and provide you with those forms. And it's just a form that your doctor fills out, right? It's not scary.
It's not scary. It's not,
No.
and it's also, you pay into these things, use
Right.
them like this, if you need it. And, even aside from pregnancy, if you have, like right now with COVID, mental health stuff, or, after you come back to work after your leave, it's a big adjustment. Like these are there for you to use. So don't be afraid to use them,
Right. That's going to be our takeaway from today's thing is, don't be afraid to use the things that you've paid for, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
use them.
Use them. There we go.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
my next question was,
Yep.
how much time can I take off for maternity leave? So in Ontario, it was recently in the last few years. Now I'm getting older. A few years is like actually like 20 years ago.
Right.
But anyway, sorry, I digress. So you can take up to 18 months. That's
Okay.
the like short answer. And then there's sort of different compartments of it. Like under the Employment Standards Act, it's 17 weeks for pregnancy leave. And then if you've taken pregnancy leave, it's 61 weeks for parental leave.
Right.
And so it totals up 18 months. If, under the Employment Standards Act, you're entitled to this unpaid time off. It's a separate and distinct entitlement from EI. And that's important because if you have two partners that want to take leaves, they can take leaves under the Employment Standards Act. So the parental leave, both partners can take. And the parental leave, 61 weeks if you've taken the pregnancy leave, or 63 weeks if you haven't taken the pregnancy leave. Both partners can take that time off unpaid, and then you apply for EI. Now you can't, there's limitations on how much EI the couple can take together. So those are, it's a nuance, but just you're entitled to the unpaid leave off, and that's a separate and distinct entitlement from the EI part.
Right. And we always encourage people, if you have very specific questions about EI, to call them, right? To call the hotline, because I'm hearing so many HR people give sort of wrong information, because a lot of things have changed with new parental leave, things like that. So if you have a complicated situation and you have a partner who wants to take leave and you're trying to figure it out, often it's best to just contact the hotline, and they can help sort of sort it out and make sure you have all the forms.
I love that advice, and that advice is bang on. To be honest, I've been practicing law for 13 years, and I'm even reluctant to answer EI questions because it's so complicated. And plus, like, you call a person, you get different answers, but they do call Service Canada, look it up, the number for EI, and get the answers for your own particular situation. Like Allison said, right now with COVID, you can qualify for EI benefits a lot with a lower threshold than before. So definitely call yourself and get those answers. And it's confusing, so.
And it's confusing. Even
it's my job, and it's confusing.
Yeah, and that's why this is my full-time job, and I'm always like, you're going to still need to call them, though. I'm going to tell you this, and you're still going to need to call them because it's complicated.
Yes, it's complicated for sure. So then my next question is, can my employer fire me while I'm on maternity leave? And it's going to be a similar answer to that pregnant, like, can they fire me when I'm pregnant question? And the answer is, like, the short answer is yes, but only if the termination is not related or linked to the fact that you took a leave. So this is really complicated, but the types of questions I would be asking if someone calls me, I'm on maternity leave and I've been fired. Has anyone else been terminated? Is the workplace still open? Is your replacement who's filling your role still there doing your job? Is the department shut down? Because going back to my example, if the whole department shut down and they give you notice of termination, you're going to want to make sure they make the effective date on your return date, just so your EI is not impacted with your package offered. But other than that, if they've shut down the whole department, it's legal. However, it will be illegal if they like terminate you. You're the only one terminated and your leave is still there and staying there. Why are you being terminated? It's because you're on leave. And this is a very nuanced question where you probably want to get a lawyer, but like to dig into some of the facts. But unfortunately, Moms at Work group, I see this way too much, either like people getting while they're on leave or while they're coming back. And to me, it's very high risk. It's red flags, alarm bells going off, fire, smoke coming out the windows. Let's talk about it. I mean, and you know, we'll see if we can negotiate a better package based on the fact that it's very high risk and you might have more damages.
And that's any questions? Yeah, this is not like a few people, by the way. This is not like 1 or 2 or 3. The number of people, even just within this community, that's happened to, it is a lot. So a lot of times people just say, oh, well, you know, I just don't want to fight this or whatever. I still encourage people to always do a consult just to like, so that they don't have to like sit with it and try and figure it out themselves. Yeah, I don't sell legal services, but as someone who runs this group, I think it's a really good idea because I see too many women just walk away and think that, you know, there's something that they did and there's nothing that you did wrong. That's not okay.
Yeah, quite frankly. So before being involved in this group, I had a few of these types of cases along the way. And since being involved in this group, like, it's actually really alarming and concerning and disgusting to me that this is going on so much. Because, you know, just because, you know, your replacement's $5,000 cheaper salary or something like that, they still like you still have a right to your job back. That, you know, just because there's a small cost savings, that's not a legitimate reason. The problem is, I can tell you here it's illegal, but that doesn't stop the employer from doing something illegal. And where we left them, we need to try to negotiate something for you. But yeah, it is alarming to me, the number of people that have come to me from this group based on such circumstances.
So I'm going to ask a question that goes exactly along with this, because this is something else that we've seen in COVID, is that, and I get asked this all the time, so I'm going to ask you, if someone is laid off and then they see their company post a job posting that's very similar to their job posting, what do you recommend that they do?
So the thing is with temporary layoff, it's sort of a new thing. Like
Yeah.
before COVID-19, you would have layoff in certain industries being like construction or seasonal workers and seasonal hotels and vacation towns and stuff like that, but layoff was not really that common. And there's a case from a few years ago that basically found unless your contract, your employment contract specifically allows for temporary layoff, even though the Employment Standards Act, our minimum legislation allows for it, if your contract doesn't speak to it, it actually is arguably a constructive dismissal. Now, what I said to people at the beginning of COVID, this is unprecedented, it's a pandemic. The courts are going to have more flexibility when these things are actually challenged. However, what I would say is now we're like 10 months into the pandemic, it's going to be case by case. If you work for a restaurant and the restaurant's closed and you're laid off, okay, like, well, makes business sense. But if you work like in HR and the business is not affected by COVID and it's really busy and now they've posted your job, then I would be having a consult with an employment lawyer to argue constructive dismissal and or discrimination, depending. I heard from people during COVID from moms that they had kids that they were helping, they were still working, but they felt that they were discriminated against because they had to deal with some childcare obligations, change a meeting time or whatever. Those types of things are alarming to me. And I would say get a lawyer consult, try to either negotiate a package or return to work. It's not an easy, it's such a hard thing right now with COVID, but definitely they don't just have a right to do that.
Right. And that's the banging point is like COVID is not the excuse, right? Just because it's COVID doesn't mean that all the laws go out the window. I'm hearing a lot of like because of COVID, but always like check be aware of your rights and be aware of your employment contract. And it's really important. I'm going to keep hammering this. Deborah's not hammering this. I am hammering this, right?
Yeah. And it's disturbing to me. I think like, look, there are legitimate, a lot of businesses have suffered, and like my husband owns a spa, it's closed. I mean, now like they can do massage therapy, but they can't do anything else. So like, obviously there's certain businesses that are legitimately affected, but I'm hearing from too many people that where it's like they pick the person on disability leave or returning from mat leave or, and then we have a problem. So lawyer up. Okay, so next question. What rights do I have while I'm away on pregnancy parental leave? So, one thing is that they have to continue your participation in the benefits plan if you still have that. So under the Employment Standards Act, that's legally required. You're entitled to earn vacation time off, but that's not paid vacation.
Yeah.
So it's very confusing and it's a different right.
Yeah.
Some employers do allow you to accrue paid vacation while you're off, but it's not a legal obligation. So if you get 2 weeks vacation per year, you're off the full calendar year. When you come back, you have the 2 weeks unpaid time accrued. You've accrued your seniority, but you don't have a right to the paid leave unless they have a better policy around that. Yeah, and I would also argue that like you should be entitled to cost of living pay increases. So if everybody got a 2% cost of living pay increase, you should be getting that too. That's not under the Employment Standards Act, but it seems like, out of like general principles, it's a pay increase based on the cost of living in 2021 or whatever year it is that you're watching this. But, merit increases, I have a question about that later on, and it's a little bit more complicated, but, those are some of your rights while you're off. And then your rights on returning from leave. What are my rights when I return to leave? So that's, so you're entitled to be put back into your job if it still exists, and if it doesn't exist, a comparable job. So this is where I get cajillion questions from the group, because often the company keeps the replacement and then they make some hodgepodge random sucky job for you.
Sucky job, yeah.
I say sucky, like legal term, but like, I mean, just because I'm getting a call, they're like, my meaningful, like I love doing X, Y, and Z, and that was the best part of my job, and my replacement has it, and they're telling me to like do all these things. Now, if it's going to be a case by case basis, but I'm particularly concerned if they've kept the person from your leave and they're still like doing your job. And then they're giving you some hodgepodge job, or they terminate you. Then I have human rights related concerns, because and this is again alarming, happening too much.
Yes. What about title? So we've heard a lot of people who are like, hey, I was an office manager before, and when I came back, they made me an assistant.
I'm just laughing because I've had like maybe five of you call me and say this question. So So it's not funny. It's very concerning and discriminating. Like, I mean, I guess a few of my questions are: is there another office manager,
Right.
and were you ever an assistant, and what's your pay, and what's your
Yeah.
duties, and let's flesh this out.
Right.
So I mean, a demotion, even if you have the same pay, could be
Yep.
seen as a constructive dismissal and discriminatory. So I would seek legal advice on that for sure.
That's so our takeaway here is that's not okay. You should ask questions if they're substantially changing your jobs or giving you a strange new title or giving you a hodgepodge collection of tasks that is not a job. That is when you start. My line is always, I'm like, does it smell funny? Right? Like, does it pass the smell test? I'm like, then you might want to get some advice on that, because it happens a lot more than you think it does.
It happens a lot. And I mean, a few things. Sometimes people want to write a demand letter and negotiate a package because they don't want to return back to that. Or sometimes I tell them, I can help them write a letter. Like, let's say to the employer, this seems like it's not comparable. I have significant concerns. In good faith, I'll try it for a couple months.
Yep.
Like, so that you're allowed to try it for a couple months, but I love flagging it, saying it seems like it's not comparable, it's not, in accordance with what I'm legally entitled to, but let's try it, and then and then you can loop back.
Sure.
But yeah, I agree. If it doesn't pass the stink test, I trust all of your intuitions when you come to me and you're like, something's going on now. Like, obviously, like, let's say they've restructured the whole place and VPs are now all directors and directors are all now whatever it is. If it's just like that, then that's obviously not going to be related to the leave. So then it's not going to be
But that's usually not what we see. Usually that's not what I see.
That's
It's
correct.
Like, that's usually not what happens, though.
That's
Very
usually
rarely.
not the problem. That's true.
Usually. Yeah.
Um, so what else? Yeah, so now I have some of the questions that
Yep.
actually got sent. So I have been denied performance review due to the fact I'm on maternity leave. Now I'm paid 8% lower than my coworkers. So this is concerning to me. I would say, unfortunately, it's not like a straightforward answer. For
Right.
sure, this is wrong. However, it seems intuitively like we have some good reasons why it might be discriminatory.
Right.
So, like, I would want to flesh it out with the person. Like, for example, did you work 11 of 12 months and then they refused to give you a performance review when you really worked most of that year? Is it, is your performance review linked with both merit increase and cost of living increase? Because if you're being declined even cost of living increases, then I'm concerned. What else? Like, for example, like, how long did you work that year? So if let's say you were off the full calendar year, in that case, I wouldn't expect them to do a performance review when you're off the full calendar year. I'm just making up like sort of arbitrary dates, but so that's why we have to flesh out the facts. But I would definitely think that it sounds like it might not pass the stink test, and there might be some good arguments of discrimination, and especially related to cost of living increases. So
Right.
if you're just coming back, you're off for a year and you get nothing, and there's like, everybody else got at least 2%. Like, let's say the performance review, you get a range and there's a minimum range based on cost of living, then I'm really alarmed. And I'm still alarmed in the other case, but it's just, you have to sort of flesh it out a little bit.
Yep. We hear this a lot too, that people come back from maternity leave and they're not given the opportunity to like have regular performance reviews, and they make you wait a long time. And so those things are a bit concerning too, if they're denying you the opportunity to participate in, company-wide initiatives for more pay. That's a bit weird.
It is weird and it is concerning. And like, yeah. So maybe if you're going off in February and you're due for a performance review right around then, maybe you ask for it early, or you even
Right.
say, can we make time while I'm off just to make sure I get it, or immediately when I come back. You don't have to be available to them when you're on time off. But I'm just saying, just making sure that it's getting in there and being proactive about it, because unfortunately they might not be proactive about it on your own behalf.
Yep.
But yeah, it is concerning. It's very concerning. And so it's definitely something that might be discriminatory. And then the other thing too is, like, even like if there's opportunities for promotions while you're off, like, you have a right to participate and and be involved in those. So again, you want to sort of be proactive about it, and maybe even say to them, like, if there's any opportunities, I want to be made aware, because it could be discriminatory too if they don't allow you to participate in those processes.
Right.
What are my options if I don't have childcare? So these are sort of the last few questions. So
Yep.
typically pre-COVID 19, the employees have an obligation to make reasonable efforts to secure childcare. And, pre-COVID 19, you would have the obligation to get appropriate daycare or whatever else that looks like for you. You would have the right, if you've made such reasonable such reasonable efforts, to ask for accommodation. So for example, let's say your work hours are 7 a.m. till 3 or something like that, but the daycare doesn't open till 7. You can say to your employer, I've looked around, the daycares all don't open till 7. I have to start at 7:30. To me, that would be a reasonable request, but depending on the availability and stuff like that. Or you have to leave half an hour early. Again, it could be a reasonable request, but you do have to make efforts. So with COVID-19, everything sort of went out the window. A lot of daycares are closed. There's also reduced schedules. There's also a lot more protocols for picking up and dropping off. It takes a lot longer. So if you're having any of these issues right now, I would just encourage open communication with, I shouldn't have said if, because you're having all of these issues right now.
Because we are right now.
I just would encourage open communication with your employer, because this isn't going to ask forever. So the types of, so what you can say is, look, the daycare is these are the issues with my daycare. I'm requesting X, Y, and Z, and you need to work with the employer. And then sort of as a last resort too, you can request an unpaid leave. This might be relevant if, for example, your kid has a runny nose and you're not allowed to go to daycare for a couple weeks. There's the infectious disease emergency leave under the Employment Standards Act. It's a protected leave. It's unpaid. All of which to say, you have to make reasonable efforts. It's harder to make reasonable efforts during COVID-19. You're allowed to request accommodations like flexible work hours, later times, and you're allowed to request an unpaid leave. And then this is my line: do not quit, do not quit, do not quit. Request all those, avail yourselves of all those accommodation requests and unpaid leave. Like I would just say, and that might even include sick leave if you're stressed out due to, like, this is the impact on you right now is a lot. Like I meant you, like all of you in this group who's taking care of children in this pandemic. So if you might even have need a sick leave due to mental health or other sick related issues. So I would just say, exhaust all your avenues of the types of leaves. Look at that ladder Allison was talking about. But don't quit. You're allowed to request for accommodations. Now, the caveat would be is if there is daycare available and you're just refusing on the basis of I decided I like to work from home or whatever, at some point you're not going to be entitled to an accommodation. It's going to be a resignation at some point, but we're not there yet. So if it's COVID-19 related, let's try to get that unpaid leave and just try to work from there, and then reassess once things are better, whenever that may be.
Right. When things are better. Yeah. It's not funny, but we're holding on hope here.
Yeah. I mean, now it is. Do we have time for a couple more questions?
Yep.
Okay. So my boss told me to find childcare or get a new job. What can I do? So this is sort of along the lines of the answer of my last question. Is childcare even available? And if there's limitations, I would encourage you to say to your boss, here's the childcare that I can secure.
Yep. And
otherwise, I'm not what's not available is X, Y, and Z. Can we work together to find a resolution? And if they terminate you based on that, that would be discriminatory. But you have to you have to look for what's actually reasonable. And maybe I don't know what that is for you or the area you live in or given your circumstances, but you make efforts, tell them what's available and go from there. And ask for an extension. So for example, if for some reason you can't file childcare, maybe your children's daycare got shut down because of COVID-19 and you're looking, you could say, I would just be very clear. My daycare got shut down. We're looking for other options. Please, can I have 4 extra weeks to look for those options? I would be very clear about that, just to protect yourself, because they can't force you. But if you're just choosing not to find it and there is options available at some point, then you might be deemed to have resigned. It's not a forever accommodation,
And timelines are also important, because I always caveat, as an HR person, we can help you, but it can't go on forever. So if you say, I'm trying to look for childcare and I expect to have it in the next 2 weeks, 4 weeks, accommodations are not meant to be forever, right? They're not well, in rare cases, but these ones are usually time bound, right? So help us help you and say, you know what, we need 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is, but let us know what that time is.
Yeah, and one other thing to mention, which I haven't even got into, is like if you are immunocompromised or someone in your
Right.
family has those health issues, so you can't use daycare for those reasons, that's a medical accommodation.
Yep.
So just be very clear, exactly, be clear communicating with your employer. Here's a medical note. We can't do daycare because of this. And so I need either to work from home or unpaid time off. I'd prefer
Right.
to work from home, or I need unpaid time off. Like, you can try to create your solution. It's not a one size fits all approach, but yeah, so just I would encourage communication. Don't just ignore timelines, all of that. Fantastic to protect yourself.
Right.
And then the last question was, I'm going to quit, but do I have any other options? It was kind of a vague question. So I don't know
Yep.
why you're going to quit, but if you're going to quit because you of the childcare issues, don't do that. Let's like do those other things we just discussed. If you're really burnt out, maybe your doctor's going to say you're suffering from, whatever medical conditions and you need 4 weeks off. So
Right.
whatever it is, I'm not a doctor. I'm not prescribing a random prescription, but I encourage you to speak to your doctor. Whatever it is, if it's that you need unpaid time off, if you need vacation, if you need sick leave, if you need some time to find childcare accommodations, I would like sort of canvas all those options before quitting. At
Right.
some point, quitting might be the right option for
Yep.
you, but don't just quit because it's COVID-19 and it's stressful, because I'm hoping in a few months it's not going to be like this.
Right. And that's the thing. That's the we get a lot of desperate pleas in the community that we're seeing, that it is so much and other workers are not there and you're working 14-hour days and have childcare and whatever. And you know what? It is too much. That's absolutely too much. And just like Deborah said, there are typically options available to you. So this won't last forever, right? This won't be like this forever. And I know for a lot of people, school coming in and out and, having school age kids and daycare kids and multiple things. But like Deborah says, we should just have little signs. It's like, don't quit, don't quit, don't quit. And when we say that, we just mean look at your other options first, right? Like, please look at your other options, because that will provide that financial stability that you need to be there. And that's an important thing too, to think about before we go all the way to the other side, right? Let's do it step by step.
And there's a lot of job protected leaves that might
Yes.
be available to you, which means you're allowed to take the unpaid time off, have your job protected, and come back at the end of that protected leave, whatever that is. So I encourage you to consider those options, because it's not the best economy right now, and it's better to hold on to the job you have. And if it's not, and then see what happens at the back end. But yeah, it's everyone's burnt out, and especially the moms who are getting the brunt of the work in this pandemic. So yeah, so know your options and don't quit. See all the options available and then go from there.
Perfect. All right. So thank you, Deborah, for being here for our speaker series. And and as always, Deborah is in the Moms at Work group. We will have her email at the bottom of here so you can get in touch with her and her website. But we encourage you, not as a sales point for me to be like, it's worth it very often to have someone else give you an opinion, a professional opinion, even to put your mind at ease that you're doing the right thing or that you have gone through all your options, right? So thank you for being here, Deborah. I really appreciate it, as always.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.